other episode of Strength and Skill. Today, we're going to take a very different twist on something. So, together with Kelly, we've come up with a bunch of rules, or let's say insights, more than anything else. And we wanted to kind of like break down these insights that we've come up with. And this will be a two-part episode in itself.
Mhm.
And yeah, with this episode, we're going to be like digging into about say 10 or 15 of them. And we'll take another crack at it and then go into the second episode and then do the remainder of the things we have left over. And the whole thought process comes from how overseas basketball really has certain rules. So that's where this whole thought process stemmed from. And I just initially took a crack at it myself first and shared the entire list of potential rules that I came up with. And Carrie loved them so much as a thought process. She said, no, we better get this done. And then it just took on a life of itself, pretty much.
Mhm. Yeah, I think the biggest thing with regards to this episode and the next episode for athletes, coaches, recruiters, anybody listening, and the following that we have is we're definitely going to start to uncover the truths and attend to some topics and some things that people may not want to hear, but they need to hear. And from your experience in a different type of capacity within the space of overseas basketball with myself, player development now, but even providing my pastime experience as a player, and even you yourself, Erme, and it, shifting, we both bring those kind of unique experiences as players, and then now observing how it has evolved and now our roles within the space now and the industry. So I think there's going to be a lot of value, a lot of great perspectives. But it's more so, yeah, we're going to uncover a lot of the truths that a lot of people maybe even searching for. And so hopefully we could provide them just that. And they could further reach out to us if they ever want more in depth on that. But I'm very excited to hit some of these questions today. You did a bang of job.
Well, I mean, let's keep fingers crossed that we don't overlap a lot in terms of the rules that we actually select. But anyway, I mean, even if we do, I mean, I'm pretty sure that it'll be pretty interesting to talk about.
It would be, because like the male game and female game is the same. However, I don't actually really fear that we would overlap, because and I know, and we're going to expose our audience to the industry behind it with money and opportunities. Oh, so very different. So we're going to have different perspectives. I'm not going to worry too much on that one. So
for sure about that. All right. So, Kerry, why don't you kick us off?
Oh, no. You give us the first.
All right. Okay. In that case, then, let me have a quick look. And all right, I'll start out with this one. I mean, even though it was, let's say, not even in one of the first thoughts I had, I think more that I look back on the whole list, here's what I want to start out with. So, connections still run the game. Yeah. So that is to me really very, very critical, because at the end of the day, yeah, I mean, when you look at the grand scheme of things of how basketball overseas is actually run, if you know a bunch of people that can actually get you to a place, oh yeah, I mean, you really need to use those connections to reach out and then find yourself a spot on a roster.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'll also dig into this. I mean, it's been, I think, plus 2 decades since I actually played at a pro level. But back then, I mean, I had a very, very different circumstance. I mean, I only, first of all, played about 4 full seasons, and then was unfortunately dropped the stop, so to say, because of injuries. And my experience was as a pro player, really, I was stuck in between a rock and a hard place because um, it practically meant to me that I could only do a certain number of things because I had dual nationality. I was
Mhm.
Turkish, but I also had a Dutch passport. And because I was playing in a home country of Turkey, I was treated as a Turkish national. And that led to a circumstance of me being seen as, let's say, a local homegrown player. But a lot of the experiences that I did have till that point stem from the fact that I actually never really grew up as a homegrown player because a part of my basketball journey was already outside. I mean, I had done a stint in the Netherlands playing youth development and had a bunch of tournaments in terms of back then what it was even AU basketball. So I mean, it was a very very different scenario in itself. So looking back on what I really had faced and where it pulled me through, me going to the US after I stopped playing and everything that I lived through, it really triggered one thing. Hell yeah, I mean, connections really do carry you through the entire journey which you live through as a basketball player and even after that. So, I mean, starting from this point to me really does make a lot of sense. And now that I am helping tons of players myself, and one of the primary things that a lot of players still struggle with, they have difficulty in terms of trying to get connections, even if they try to land their first job or if they're veterans and they're trying to go into a different market and they have problems in terms of trying to figure out if it makes more sense to stick around Europe or go to Asia or to South America, or I mean, may it be? I mean, I even like helped a player the other day. He was trying to get some contact in Mongolia, and I mean, I luckily a friend of a friend of a friend, so somebody that's literally kind of like third string of a contact to me. I had to reach out to them to try to help this player out. And I
Mhm.
do it just from the goodness of my heart, to be honest. But um, it'll lead up to other rules that we basically talk through for sure. But I mean, for sure, I mean, connections they still run the game.
I love how you just name it like that because it's such a powerful statement that really does hold true. Connections run the game, and it is who you know all the time, every time. Even if we eliminate basketball from this instance, it's in life. It's who you know. And how do you do that? You do that by networking. And I remember from my personal experience, um, going and being an import. So like for you, you had a dual passport. For myself, different turn on this, where the female game is the same. If you do have a dual passport, clubs see you a lot more desirable. Why? Because you could be claimed as a quote unquote domestic, and then you don't take up that import spot, which a lot of teams and clubs as well as leagues, depending on the country, do only have a certain amount of imports that they're allowed to play. I remember in Germany, only three could be on the team, but in a different part of Germany. And there was another country, I don't really remember during my time what country it was, but that country, there could only be one of us imports on the court at all times. So you could have three, but you can't have like the one or two. And if we take it from the viewpoint of the game and I guess that country, yeah, you want to eliminate it just being like one team of, say, like we're in Germany, Germans playing one team of say 5 Americans or 4 Americans and 1 Canadian. So I understand that standpoint of it. But then we also have to then talk about what's the other factor in it. It's money. And so those imports, yeah, you have to give them so much more money with regards to health insurance, and then their stay, your more kind of quote unquote top blue chip prospects, where yes, they are maybe they're your scorers, they're your quote unquote money makers. In the higher levels, we have to call it as it is. And majority of the time, they are Americans, so very few Canadians. And especially when I was going through, and that was from the span of 2017 to 2020, so it's still fairly recent. But that's what it is. They're looking for Americans. They're looking for those ones that could score, that could put up huge numbers. Why? Because then that's money, and then they get more money, and then so it's a snowball effect. So you have the factor of money in there. And so if you do have a dual passport, looping right back to it, then they see you kind of almost as a steal, because you really are an import, but you have that dual passport. And male side of things, if we shift over to there, it's so much more, of a necessity, of importance. Why? Because okay, big dollars, all that sort of stuff, but the male game and the leagues and the levels with the money, the lucrative stuff, the business side, it's 10x. So for them, if you could really steal somebody as a domestic and have a dual passport, fantastic. That's from the organization, that's from the business side of things. From the player standpoint, for the male and the female side, and from my personal experience, is that it is kind of quote unquote a loophole where, and I just say this from my personal experience. I remember I was so frustrated seeing some players get an opportunity to play overseas before I did. And I knew confidently I was better. And I was thinking, how are they getting a contract before me? What am I doing? What am I not doing? I know, A, I'm better in the game. B, I'm putting 10x more work than them. What am I missing? How did they have a contract already? And so for me, what I would do, because I went without an agent, because why? As an import, I wanted to see myself as more desirable, because I already knew I'm going to be so much more. Why? Because I don't have a dual passport, and I know they have to make money. So how could I be more desirable? And so what I would do is I would do my morning training session. I would come home, I would be on Facebook, and I would blast messages to coaches. I would go through them, blast messages in the inboxes. I still even have the history within my stuff and the notebook that I have. And then I would, oh yeah. And
that is crazy.
And it's super cool, because I remember when I did get my German contract, the club that originally wanted to sign me later in my career, I reached out to them and they said no to me. And the ones that did say no to me, I circled each and every one of them when I played in Germany against them. And yeah, I'm that player. If you're a competitor and it's you're not going to give me, okay, I respect you, but I'm going to circle you and I'm going to make sure you remember me and what you said no. So that's here and there. But essentially, I would come home, I would Facebook message them, cold messages. Then I would go train again, come back, go through them and why Facebook? Because you see the players and the mutual friends. And so the more people I started to message, it goes back to connections run the game. The more mutual friends I started to see, oh, that person knows that one. That person's in Spain. They know somebody in Lithuania. They know somebody in the UK. And it really put into perspective how small the basketball world is throughout my experience of doing that. And when I was even communicating to the coaches, they're like, oh yeah, I know so-and-so here. I know so-and-so here. And I'm just thinking throughout this communication of, they know somebody in a different country. And I'm like, whoa, okay. And then that's where I really got exposed to, if you know somebody, you know somebody. And especially as imports, just to kind of like through my experience to wrap that kind of up, is as an import, the hardest thing to do is just to get your foot in the door. And especially like for me uniquely, because I ran into some unfortunate instances and some unfortunate people there, I had a few scamming encounters, which didn't allow me to play right after university. And so now a coach has to take a chance on me. I haven't played competitively in a year. I've been training for a year, but you know how that goes. Somebody could go worse or somebody could get better. In my case, I got better, but now they're running that risk. So with that, it's like, okay, well, now who do you really know that's going to just give you that shot? Just give you that one thing. Because then once you're over in Europe, man, everyone sees you, everyone there. So it's that initial thing. And so it just goes right back to, yeah, from my personal experience, connections 100% run the game, and how important it is to meet as many people and just to contact as many as you can, because even if you directly contact that first person, they may not be your end game. They may just like within your kind of process start to try and find you to get you to somebody's actual name, because you even referenced you were the third person
Yeah.
line. So if I know like, hey, I need to get to Airmay, okay, there's two mutual friends here. Maybe I say this, and then it leads me to here, and then it leads me to here, and then, oh, now I got him. So at the end of the day, it is connections. You're 100% right. And so my advice would be, A, continue to Facebook message people, because coaches still do that. And you see all the clubs and their pages there. But B, it's just to continue to keep
I
network.
need to cut you off, and I do need to warn people about one thing though. These days, something that I've recognized is that there are a ton of these Facebook groups kind of posting jobs for overseas basketball players. Or
oh, that's a red flag for me.
Yeah, people. I mean, if you see those kind of groups, stay away from them, because they are pretty much there as black holes trying to suck you in and trying to get bad stuff through to you. Definitely steer clear of those places. I mean, if you want to reach out to somebody directly, use LinkedIn, use Facebook, use Instagram, just direct message them. But I mean, rather than joining those kind of groups in those spaces, they're not going to get you to your next spot for sure. Just keep that in mind and be aware of that. Let that be food for thought. Obviously, it's up to you on how you really do your stuff on social media. But I mean, it's just something that's been really bugging a lot of people, and a lot of the scams that are even taking place in social media presences, or I mean, even the stuff that they kind of loop you in, as I said before. I mean, it's really nuts over there. Seriously, it is.
And I will add on top of that, Airmay, because it is something that triggered, to put in this disclaimer of what we were doing when we were doing it years back will not necessarily translate to right now. There will be some overlap. However, there is a big thing in clarifying. Never join a group. All I used it in my experience was kind of like that validating it, and really kind of quote unquote Facebook stalking them to try and get that main connection to directly message. So whether it was the direct message to the head office phone number that I would phone, or it's the direct email of somebody, you don't want to be in community groups. You want to do what you just said in directly contacting either the general manager or the coach, getting them on the phone. But using those platforms, like you said, as a LinkedIn or something, just to grab that contact information to start to, generate those emails and that sort of stuff. So it's very good to kind of have that clarified on your aspect, but I definitely agree. Just stay clear of those groups as well, and keep it, direct messaging, direct emails, and all that sort of stuff. Okay. My turn for question. Okay. being selfish pays.
Okay.
And for me, this was one of the hardest things to do because A, of who I am, B, the type of player, but C, also business wise. It is a business. You do have to play that aspect of the game without it, tainting the purity of the actual game between the four lines. But that's something that it took my best friend who played overseas professionally for a few years. She was 2 years ahead of me. So I was able to really lean on that. And then also a few people that I networked and met along the way who out of their kindness of their heart kind of said to me the same message, especially since I myself wasn't going without an agent. And even if this is a player who is wanting to contact an agency and, really get represented, and I'll never forget it, they all told me, you have to be your own advocate. And you do have to be selfish. You have to, quote unquote, sell yourself, because if you come across as confident, then it's very different than cocky. That's what's going to allow you to, display to that agency, to that club, you could actually make it overseas when you're by yourself. And B, it's just that, presence of, okay, you're confident in your abilities. You know what you've done to put yourself in this position. So sell me on it, because all of those people, GMs, front office, coaches, all they're doing is they're sitting back and they're, in this position saying, tell me why I should spend money on you, especially as an import, and give you more money. How could you help us for, us to help you? And so being selfish pays is a great way to pretty much say, you have to be okay with coming across as, a confident, arrogant. And it is, in fact, just that, because if you're brought in as a shooter and you pass up your shots, you have one role. You put the ball in the hoop.
Yep.
As a point guard, if I'm being brought in and my main role is to facilitate for this club, to make sure that my shooter's happy, to make sure my import 6'3" American to score 30 gets their 40 touches on the ball. If that is the case, okay, and that's that role that's being, selfish within that aspect of it, because I know I want to touch the other side of this, but you have to then be willing to do that. And on the flip side, I was told, because I was a bit more natural of a point guard, one of the hardest things I had to do was just this. And it's a bit more of what this kind of question encapsulates of being selfish pays. The people that put the ball in the hoop will get the more money. And so for me, yes, did I want to pass first? Yes, did I want to facilitate? But the only reason I was even able to get a contract or a look is because I then had to be a lot more selfish within my game. And that's something that, as a player development coach, I say to the females, and it's something that was told to me by my good friend and player development coach: you have to be unselfishly selfish. And I say it all the time because it just hits so much from when I experienced it as a player to then actually seeing it in, real time, in action, in what it could provide a player beyond, and more opportunities. Yeah, you have to get your own looks, because if you don't put yourself first, if you aren't selfish, your teammates aren't going to get their opportunities. And that's from even a skill and a player development standpoint. If you pass up on your shots, then now you're limiting my opportunities. Why? Because now people know you're not going to shoot the ball. So now they're going to have more gravity towards me, which means I eliminate some of my stuff. So it goes hand in hand here. And then I'm mad as a teammate if I give you the ball as a shooter and you don't shoot the shot that I know you can make, that you're brought in to make. I'm pissed at you, So you have to be selfish. You have to be unselfishly selfish. And so I had to develop a bit more of a scoring point guard and mentality. And that's what the team needed of me. And that's kind of, my experience with it. So if you yourself are not really a natural scorer, newsflash, you have to uncomfortably start to become a lot more selfish, especially if you want to play pro, because at the end of the day, yes, the ball scores, but they really want somebody who could consistently score and add to that firepower so that you could also provide for your teammates. But they want to score. They want somebody to give them just that. So if you do not have that a part of your game, start to develop that and be confident in it.
I will sidetrack you
And ask you this.
Did this come naturally?
To you, or did you have struggle in adjusting to it?
Can you say that again?
Did you naturally adjust to this?
Or did you struggle when you were going through that phase?
I didn't struggle because I think every high level player does experience that when they play, especially it pertains to us Canadians and Americans. Our role within the team that we play in high school, we're going to be the people that are averaging 40 to 60. Like, we're your scorers, okay? When we go on an AAU team or a national team, provincial team, now we're surrounded by other people who could put the ball in the hoop, and you're like, yes, I don't need to score as much. So now you start, the different aspects of your game that you kind of like. So for me in high school, I didn't like being the main primary scorer, because just growing up, I loved natural point guard, Becky Hammond, Steve Nash, facilitators. You leave me open, I'll knock down my shot, but I want to get everyone involved first. So that was me. And then so as I started to grow and understand, okay, there's high school carry, now there's provincial team circuit carry, and then there's university carry. And university carry within, the university's system, the other players, how I fit more naturally. So it's that puzzle piece of an elite level player understanding what are you actually really naturally good at, what can you expand on, but what can you complement your other players along with, the culture, the organization, the club, and all that sort of stuff. And then you even hear the expression today, you have Syracuse mellow, or you have New York mellow, right? And that kind of just pertains to the role that they had, A, on that team, and B, within their span of their careers, right? Miami LeBron is different than LA LeBron. And it also speaks to how you have to evolve when the game is evolving. But just going back to it to answer your question, it wasn't a struggle per se. It was just, okay, a reality of, no, I have to be this player in this capacity at this level. When I thought, because I'm surrounded by other pros, I didn't have to be. I think that was the thing that I struggled with, because it didn't really kind of, make sense to me where I needed to score a lot more and be selfish because I had others. But that's not the case in pro. It's completely different, because everyone
I agree.
selfishly and needs their own, because everyone's selfishly on different salaries. So yeah,
I'll give you
the perspective to this.
Yeah, please.
Again, being a dual national and potentially the way that I was seen as a
homegrown player, I had a tremendous struggle with this, because
I was being brought up
from
one side, being in the Netherlands, to not playing selfish
at all, and
that I should be distributing.
I should be constantly thinking about being a pure point guard. But
all of a sudden,
I head over to Turkey and spent high school last 2 years there to having to flip the switch. And
there, the whole industry was so
professionalized already, in a sense that
it made me just think about one
thing. So the higher that I have to go, the more selfish that I have to be.
Mm.
And that would have been the only way that I actually
would have been able to get the first pro contract
contract that I potentially uh,
again. So I
Mhm.
mean, it at that point very
early on
said to me one thing. I mean, because I was
being approached by a ton of agents already, and I had interest. I mean, I was almost hitting a barrier, even being selected to.
uh, national team selections, and I mean, for one reason or another, I mean,
I was able to either go to those selection practices or not, but I was being seen, and
and even there, the guys that I was normally
around
at club level, I saw them be way more selfish.
when they were going to those national team selection practices. And I mean, the guards, especially, and even the scoring guards, they were so damn selfish. And I mean, I get my first pro contract, as I was saying. So, I mean, skip to the fact that I got my first pro contract, and now I'm on a team, and there are 3, 4 Americans there.
Mm.
And all they're telling me is like, kid, you gotta constantly be selfish. You want to get your payday, you want to get that bonus,
Yeah.
you got to score. I mean, it's one way or the other. And I mean, they're like in the headset constantly. I mean, every single training, if they don't end up working their closeouts, if they don't end up doing what they're supposed to be doing, then I mean, the GM is right behind the stands, and I mean, the guy's just looking over, and he's like, "Yeah, I know what's going to happen. You guys are going to get cut very soon." I mean, and I mean, none of the imports they actually wanted to get cut,
Yeah.
and it was very, very rare that we actually had mid-season imports come in.
Mm.
And
Yeah,
the second
so
year that I
rare.
was playing, it's rare, but I mean, now it's become a little bit more of a thing. I mean, when the team is really weak, coming
Yeah.
into midway through the season, now you can actually change them out. And coaches are now in a mindset where they actually do that now these days.
And I will say, I want to ask you, because you have a bit more thumb pulse on that for the female side. But I know for me, through the player experience, when I wanted to try and get that halfway contract, when I went through a scam. So I was like, okay, well, now I'm going to make sure I get the halfway. Halfways for females, never. Like, the only time was obviously, quote, like, unfortunately, if there was an injury, but even at that point in time, because of like the money standpoint, they still weren't seeking somebody out. So my question to you, because I really actually don't know if the rate has gone up on the female side. Do you see a lot of mid-season? Because we know it happens all the time with the guys, because once again, it's business. Guys, a bit more dime a dozen,
Mhm.
like all just waiting at the door.
Yep.
From a female standpoint, do you see the same mid-season?
Kinda. I mean, it's been in a change the last 2, 3 years. More so now on the women's side, you also have a similar trend happening
because what is really
in
taking
place. Especially, I mean, it's also good to keep this in mind though.
obviously, I mean, it'll
This will segue into my next pick, but I mean,
Sure.
I'll just kind of like hint into something, and I'll give you more of a timeline about this. So, European basketball, yeah, season starts August, September, roughly.
Yeah.
The season ends April,
April,
March.
May.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
roughly. Again, mid-season break, December, January.
Yeah.
So, so we're right at the cusp of where the season break is right now.
Yep.
And there are a ton of inquiries on both sides equally taking place, but it is primarily Europe. See, that's the thing. I mean, in international basketball itself, there's less inclination for non-European teams to seek mid-season imports because the timeline of when they play their next games or the international competitions, it flows much more differently, so to say. Within European basketball, naturally, because there are the FIBA Europe Cups, there are the basketball Champions Leagues, there are the men's Euro
Yeah.
Leagues that are flowing around. There are the FIBA qualifiers, this, that, 3-on-3 basketball, whatever you have. I mean, there's such a mixture and jumble of stuff happening. It's like a damn gumbo. And I mean, you
Yeah.
just can't. I mean, you just can't figure out what to do. And if you're already halfway through the season and stats are low, you haven't had enough wins in your pocket to get you through the first half of the second part of the season, then
Mhm.
you're going to struggle. So what do? You look for the next best import available.
Mhm.
And it's a tough
Thing in itself. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I mean, again, I'll tie this down to whole being selfish pays.
Yep.
The more selfish import that you find,
Mhm.
they're gonna
actually get the better pay, to be honest.
Yep.
And I mean,
Yep.
it just ties into that whole fact. And I mean, to answer your question,
in a nutshell, circumstances pretty much
equal.
Yeah. And I definitely will say, like, I feel as though we have to asterisk the fact of being selfish pays in that's not eliminating players who aren't considered quote unquote primary scorers. It's not
Mm.
just for them. Yes, your top imports are, generally those roles on a team where their role has always ever been primary or secondary score. But I feel as though we do have to asterisk the fact of selfish is not just pertaining to those players that are labeled quote unquote as a primary or secondary natural score. You could still be that big person, the facilitator, but I think what you need to then have is after that, your primary, your natural, very unique role of what makes you stand out, add on at the end of it, plus selfish. Yeah, I think I just so that a lot of players don't now start to create somebody or something that they're not, and that's then not going to get you a contract, period. So you need to do the things that make you unique, that got you to a certain level, but
Mhm.
add selfishness a bit more, I think.
I agree. I fully agree.
Okay, I have my next one to choose, but I'm curious if we were on the kind of path of you segueing into the next one, what was your next one potentially?
All right. So the next one I had in line was as follows. So imports win games, nationals win trophies.
Okay, that one. Okay.
To me, this is very, very home hitting because the short span of the career that I had as a pro,
Uh,
this really was very kind of eye opening to me, so to say.
mhm,
Because I mean, I played on two teams. Both were teams from my local town of Ankara, and I mean,
The imports that we had were pretty important to the club,
mhm,
and they literally, I mean, the imports, the Americans that came in,
even the one European player that we brought in. I mean, so in Turkey back in those days. I mean, this is the end of the '90s, beginning of the 2000s. Um, we were allowed to have at least about 2, 3 Americans, and then one Bosman player. So I mean, one top level European player would be somebody that we could have in the club.
mhm,
Now, when you're a
Homegrown player and you have dual nationality, naturally,
your um, European passport,
the way that I had it, that was flown out of the pocket anyway. I mean, it didn't mean a lot of things, but
right.
I mean, it meant that I had more of an experience at the, let's say, youth development level. So that allowed the club to really use me and utilize me in a very, very different role.
Mhm,
And to an extent, I was a gateway player because my language skills were extremely good.
mhm,
And me being able to talk a bunch of languages allowed the imports to be very, very comfortable. And I was really a go-between between the imports and the more homegrown national talents.
mhm,
And it really, the more I thought about it, this made more sense to really put up there because, yeah, the imports did win a ton of the games, but when it comes to
really the more selective titles, I mean, playing in the cup game, or if you were actually eliminated
in the cup
tournament, and then if you
or a part of any other national tournament
potentially available, then yeah, the national team players, or let's say
the players that played more
Domestic.
nationally, domestically, yeah, they really picked up the slack, so to say.
Mhm.
And yeah, that's exactly where I made the difference because I mean I gained international experience, but because me being a domestic player at that stance,
Mhm.
2 seasons back to back, I led the team in 3-point scoring. And me being a young buck, I mean, again, it ties back into also being extremely selfish. I had to be selfish.
Mhm.
I mean, they put me in a point guard spot, but I mean, we also had backup guards, and I mean, even our scoring guards, they could handle the ball, so it was fine. And I mean, I even ended up switching roles, games on end, where I practically got the opportunity, never left wide open. But I mean, as soon as I got the ball, if I let it fly, it just
Yep.
dropped. So I mean,
Mhm.
you just get that done. And yeah, I mean the imports that usually watch those cup games, they really enjoyed it because they saw the effect that they also had on the team because
Mm.
at practice they were forcing the younger players to try to get more touches. They were trying to basically get everything sorted so that the younger talent really kind of got the right influence from the
Mm.
imports.
Mhm.
and I think it also
Eventually does tie into this fact again. I mean, yeah, imports don't just win the games on court; they also win the games during practice.
Yeah. Yeah, I think would it be pretty fair to say we swap out the word import for say like your starter, your quote unquote all-star player and your national with the quote unquote role player kind of names. Could you fairly say that?
pretty much
Pretty
Because I
much.
like it's essentially what we described. Once again, imports coming in are the ones that they score, they could drop 30, they put the ball in the hoop. Like those are your players. Why? Because they give you wins, they give you wins, they give you trophy, like all that sort of stuff. Like in addition to your nationals giving you trophies, but in a sense, they give you more wins, which then hey, coach now gets money, he gets paid, that gets paid, and then it goes back to the business side of things. Okay, so we could see it in that sort of capacity with regards to like the imports winning the games and the nationals winning trophies. The nationals for me, like as I was playing, huge advantage they had over myself as an import and others. Why? Because they know the league and the players the best because they've always been around it. And so what I would do as a player, and then my teammates would come up to me and say, "Hey, Carrie, like this player only does this." Like they were my scout because they knew that player inside and out. When you're an import, you're going against somebody unknown, and yes, like the more skill you are, like you could quickly adapt. But if you could have a scout already on top of what you're already bringing, obviously now you give yourself even more of an advantage, right? So I found my nationals, and I was actually the only import on my German team. They created so much value and allowed me to actually pick up like the different style or understand a team at a much faster rate that allowed me to like acclimate and really have a better transition, especially if you are coming from a different country, a different style of play on top of a different organization, a different style of play, a different culture. So if you could really lean on your nationals and your domestics, they definitely are the ones that put you over the edge. And even if we like swap out the names again, it's even in the top leagues like NCAA, Division One in Canada, you have your 5 starters, cool. It's those 1 to 3 people off the bench that are going to make the difference. And we swap that out for a national name or an import name. So it's the exact same thing, but on the grand or bigger scale, when we're playing professionally overseas, it holds true. So these imports are definitely respecting the nationals. And like for you and that experience being that quote unquote young buck, now you're learning from those imports that, you know, really want to help the young players develop, and maybe they know that, hey, these young players are learning from them, and they're just staying within this league. So it goes hand in hand, but definitely I would say, you know, the statement of imports winning the games, the nationals winning the trophies, and it's the nationals that are really kind of giving themselves longevity within it, and allowing, yeah, those imports maybe on those bigger kind of, everybody wins when everybody eats, is how I kind of, you know, see it in that sort of sense. But pretty cool to hear from like your perspective though on the national side, and then like my perspective is like the import side of things, where yeah, I'd be leaning on you, heck. And at the same time, like you mentioned, all my teammates, specifically in Germany, less in Spain, but they loved speaking English, and it was super cool and super comforting. But I always said to them like, "Hey, cool guys, but I want to learn the language." And the coach in Spain, not a lick. Like I had my translator next to me, and I just remember him like going over the board and like yelling, and then like drawing here, drawing there, and I'm like, yeah, he's mad. I'll just understand.
Actually, this whole thing with language, I mean, it's a gateway to an entirely different episode. I mean, now the more that I think about it, because like this whole, seriously, I mean, this whole thing with the fact that certain coaches, I mean, it also changes not from now of how things are versus how things were in the past as well. In the past, I mean, you never had stuff like Google Translate or instant translators or whatever. I mean, now you can have people from different countries kind of like talking to your iPhone or smartphone, and then be able to get the translation out in minutes. Back then, you'd need to get a translator. You'd need to have that translator on court with you.
Mm-hmm. Well, and even once again, it comes right back to the very important factor of money and business side of things. Lee from the New York Liberty. Why am I blanking? Lee Ming? Okay, yeah, she had her interpreter in New York. And then you just said right then and there, like Google Translate, why? So if you could eliminate somebody and pay somebody when you could just have Google Translate, have like your like water person or towel person, have the phone there, like of course there's that aspect. But when we're talking in Europe, and even my friend who's playing high level there, most of the time, and what I had, even though like coach could speak English, and he would always say like, and this is in Germany, he'd always say, "Carry quick in German." And when he asked that, it's because he was so frustrated that he couldn't like spend the time to like try and translate into English. He just like was really pissed. So then he's like, "No, I can't do English. I just got to do all German." And that's when I had like my teammate. So my teammate was translating, but it was also a cool way for me to start to learn certain words, but because of my knowledge of the game and how long I've been around it, I knew why he was mad. I knew why he was yelling at us. And so I actually like understood, or I started to like associate words with like, oh yeah, like we didn't double under there. And if there was no like, if there was a different word for that, I was like, oh, okay. So I was learning the language when he would get mad at us. But most of the time it's either, yes, the translator, or I think you would, I I don't know, from your standpoint on the guy's side, just because I think, some guys just aren't as caring or comforting or whatever. Did you have a teammate translate to you in the moment? I feel like it's a bit more of a girl kind of culture
I mean,
thing of
I
yeah,
acted a lot as translator, to be honest, but I mean, yes, to be also clear about this, yes, with the women's side of the game, for sure. I mean, the emotionality, but especially kind of the more support system that you guys have
Yeah.
in women's basketball, which is lovely. I mean, I think
yeah, to a
with the
certain
guys' side, it's just a little too much testosterone going on, and I mean, they just
Yeah.
don't want to
yeah, because
get
they
their
think,
heads
hey,
wrapped
if
around
you
sort
don't
of.
understand, then that's an advantage for me, and that's playing time for me. Like it's a bit more like I could see
Listen,
that, but not to say that like I haven't seen like guys in nationals like really like latch on to like an import, be a friend and say like, hey, coach means this, and like they would translate. But you're 100% like I'm in agreement as well, where don't see it as much with the guys, but with the girls, you'll have like that teammate and like saying, hey, he pretty much just said this in the timeout, don't do this, don't F up on this. And like, so
I'll give you a very interesting example. This past weekend, I watched a youth development game. Not so low
else,
level. I mean, and I mean, it was about they're 19 maximum 22-year-olds. Okay, so I
girls, boys,
mean, they're on the guy's side,
yeah.
and I mean, these are players that are about to hit the professional marketplace very soon. So I mean, they're at the end of their youth development years.
Yeah.
Um, there were a couple of players that actually were potentially there because they're students and they're international students, so they don't speak the local language.
Mm.
And I firsthand saw that the coach, because of this language barrier, because he couldn't scream and shout to them locally, did not play the kids. And I mean, both of the kids, they potentially scored the most points in that game. But because of the last 2 minutes, they were sit down just because of language barrier, which is very interesting. I mean, even at that level, and I mean, I won't give away what country this was in, or
Yeah.
I mean, where I watched it through, but I mean, it's just sheerly a coaching decision on how that transpires because a coach is not comfortable communicating in English or in the players are just not, let's say, um, fully immersed in the local language. This happens, and more so on the guy side. And I mean, it's that little bit of edgy, and it really turns out to be big. I
Well,
mean,
and you said that these two players were the high scoring ones in the game. That
they
that
they
that
ended up being the 1-2 top scorers of the game. They were still sat down the last 3-4 minutes of the game. They weren't in foul troubles. They weren't in any problems whatsoever. It was just entirely a coaching decision. And I mean, they ended up losing the game. They were still the top scorers.
see that that instance, that like scenario, um that puzzles me even more because it would be different if the imports weren't your top two scorers in the game. Because if that's the case, then me as say like the coach who doesn't speak English, I'm just saying to like my assistant, no one do anything else but give these guys the ball and like let's not talk to them and like let's win this game. So that's I didn't expect that story to go, in that direction, but it opens up the can of once again common recurring thing. Coach is looking out for him and his wins so that he doesn't get canned. Now, this is at the youth level, but it's at that cusp of right beforehand. So now, like, yeah, other people could be looking at him to then maybe have like a national team coaching position. So, like, for me, that story just kind of allows me to kind of paint the picture of, man, coach was just looking out for him and trying to get, his name and his cred up versus, actually understanding, the players and what he has there. That was an interesting turn for that one.
Yeah.
I will pick. How many more questions we're going to pick here?
Up to
Is that
you.
one?
We can. I mean, to be honest with you, Carrie,
Time is time.
it's relative, but yeah, up to you.
Okay, I'll pick. Okay, I want to hit these two. So I'll hit one, you hit one, I hit my next one, you hit yours. So you pick two. Okay. So this one of the two, and hopefully they don't overlap. This first one, you do not choose the league chooses you. For me, player standpoint, player perspective, then I'll switch to the more player development and kind of role I have in aiding players to kind of get opportunities overseas, especially for the female side. As a player, for me, I knew whatever came my way, I would be grateful just for the opportunity. All I wanted was the opportunity. However, you have a lot of players, and it happens on the female side. We know it's a thing on the male side, but I definitely do want to emphasize it does happen on the female side. You have a lot of greedy players, a lot of greedy females, males as well, but a lot of greedy females, a lot of greedy import females that will turn down so many opportunities thinking that they are above it. And here's the other asterisk on top of it. Yes, does it happen consistently as like a player is playing? But we're even talking about a player who has never even played professionally yet. Like they're looking for their first one and they're already being greedy, which is their number one downfall, which I cannot stress enough of, especially imports, because that's the position I'm in. And then you can maybe touch on it as a national, but as a domestic. But your first one, athletes, players, do not come in high and mighty of, yes, you have your wish list of, hey, I have my top 3 countries, France, Italy, and Portugal. That's it. That's all. And okay, offers are coming through, maybe with an agent, maybe somebody you contacted that are not in those 3 countries, and you turn it down. And I've seen it before. I've heard it as a player. I've seen it within this capacity. And I'm thinking, why? No, don't do that to yourself, because the hardest thing, like I said previous to, is you just getting your foot in the door. You just coming over here. Once you're over here, you would be shocked at how much efficient and a bit easier it is for your name to be heard, for eyes to be on you, because now you're over here. But if you only limit yourself, well, now you've just made your job 10 times harder, and you're going to make it 10 times harder, say maybe if you don't have a dual passport, if you are not your quote unquote primary or secondary score where the imports will have the other money. So now you've 2 strikes against you, and now you want to add a 3rd strike because you're greedy and it's not going to be the country, your first country. People, let's be real here. Okay, males and females, you know, one place may not be your forever home. Most of the time, it is not. It is just a part of your journey. You could return to the club, you could return to that league, but most of the time, your first kind of country league opportunity is your respectful kind of part of the build. People would say stepping stone. I kind of see it a little bit as disrespectful in that sort of instance. I just see it as a building block towards, yes, maybe you wanting to get to your maybe top 3 country or level you want to be at, or certain league. But for the fact of, you know, people wanting to search out a certain country, a certain league, never really is the case. And so it'll be dependent on import, dependent on your position. So when the statement reads, you do not choose the league chooses you, you have to embrace it, learn from it, learn from maybe the league that you're in, learn from the country, because then now that's going to allow you to then, develop skills, develop certain characteristics, develop different parts of your game that now a different league, a different country, because all leagues, all countries have a different style of play. So if you could start to figure out and not turn away any and all different, now it doesn't mean you have to be a nomad. It doesn't mean you have to go to all these countries and have everything into. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that you cannot be greedy and think that you are above a certain country, because it's actually going to lead you to maybe the league that you're going to be better playing in, or to the style of play. So for me, from a player standpoint, I knew whatever opportunity I was going to get, it's going to be like, that's going to be my learning domain. It's going to get me to the next ones that I maybe want. So I was never in that mindset of, no, it's only this or that. From a player standpoint, player development standpoint, and somebody who works alongside of one of the greatest agencies in Europe and over the world, we keep thinking, and even you yourself within that space, a player says to you, no, I don't want to play for that team, that country. No, what's the next thing? What's it almost as like quote unquote divas? Why? And then that time
I'll
clock
flip this thing.
down, that time clock goes down. Now it comes mid-August, end of August. Now you don't have anything. And now you're coming, and I'm running as a player to you, Erme, who's within the consulting space, and being like, why don't I have anything? Boo, 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 boo. I gave you 6 or 7 earlier in these months. What do you mean you didn't have anything? So players, especially as your first one at imports, don't think you're going to get your top pick, your forever, your idealized, your dream country, dream league right out the gate. It'll come with time. So that's my standpoint on it.
I'll put this thing entirely on its head. So the reason I had actually included this, I first of all came across this whole notion that, yeah, you don't choose the league chooses you, while I was scouting. And while I was scouting nationally,
working the NCAA circuit. So a lot of the players that actually
came into the NCAA, they were players that I was looking at from an international standpoint, because they've been playing either in Europe or in their home country. And when they were in the NCAA, they never had a issue in terms of adjusting
to playing in college.
But then the more I kept track of these players through time, and they either would spend 3-4 years in college, they would head back home, and they'd use that experience in their resumes. It really was a point of selection for the clubs and the leagues to be selecting these players more than anybody else. That's where it stemmed from. But the more I thought about the stuff that I do these days in terms of consulting players, and I'll rewind back all the way back to 2014 when I initially begun this side of my business.
One of the first players that I
ever had,
grumpy veteran motherfucker,
that he was. And I mean, the guy, I won't name him, I'll just call him T. He was such a grumpy guy. I would put offer on offer in front of him, and he would reject it just because he didn't like the location. Purely. Nothing
like
else.
As in the country, like the place?
No, I mean, it's like thing. I got him an offer in Germany. Yeah, too cold. I got him an offer in Poland. Yeah, still too cold. All right, let's go to South America. I got an offer from Peru. Top level team, top level league. They're gonna pay you plus 20,000 a month in Peru, which is amazing money, really.
Yeah.
It was unheard of for back then, especially. Still turned it down. It's too hot. I don't want to go to South America. It's usually a lot of trouble. When I get in trouble over there, I don't know how to deal with stuff. All right, where do you want to go?
first thing that
pops into his head, can I go to NBL in Australia?
Huh.
You have not even had the experience at that level to have played. I mean, it's unbelievable. And I mean, they have this notion of non-adjusted things in mind. They think because they come out of a top level college or a name college, they can directly go into kind of escaping into that kind of a space. Not going to happen.
Right.
not really, I mean,
Even if you're recognized as a player, if the coach doesn't,
Mm-hmm.
if they don't see enough footage on your highlight, if you don't do enough to, let's say, showboat yourself the right way,
Mm-hmm.
it's not going to get selected. But
Yeah.
it is just what it is. But initially, so
these 2 points of thought is where it stemmed from, where I really wanted to put this down. And this, by the way, Kerry, I mean, you don't choose the league chooses you. It's one of the top 10 ideas that I really came up with in terms of thinking through the whole list of groups.
Mhm.
So, and yeah, I mean, I'll also add to this.
I mean, again, during my short time playing pro, I saw this especially during my 3rd year, because the second year, the first 2 years I played for the same club, and then the 3rd and 4th year I played for
a different club. So when I initially
got offered to play for the other, let's say, local team in Ankara, I instantly accepted it because I didn't want to, let's say, leave home anyway. I mean, I wanted to stick around, was familiar territory, and the first thing I asked was, me being a little bit more experienced among all the other young bucks, was who are the imports? Who are the guys that are being brought in? Do we already have a handle on that? Because imports back end of the 90s, they were actually pre-selected and they were already brought in before anything else.
So they almost had like their own little quote unquote portal or pool.
Kinda. I mean, it was more of an informal portal, so to say.
Yeah.
But I mean, the coaching staff knew upfront who they actually wanted, and they were already having talks even before the season would be over.
Right.
So, I mean, everything was kind of
Settled more or less. So you
know the predetermined
imports that were actually coming, and based on that, actually, the youth development players would be in an opportune circumstance. I mean, so can I actually learn from this guy? If you think no, then yeah, I mean, I've seen friends of mine back then actually turn down their 2nd or 3rd pro contracts. Luckily for me, I mean, I just had the 2 of them, but I mean, those that actually turned them down, they never really had an extended career themselves either.
Mm.
And I mean, again, from the whole own personal journey that I had, I mean, if you really are expecting that you're going to choose the league, you're entirely in a fault. You're entirely in a wrong. I mean,
Unrealistic. You're in a fantasy.
extremely. I mean, it's a very
Mm-hmm.
big fantasy that you'd be living in itself. I mean, overseas basketball is definitely not that. I mean, you really need to be, sorry, but humble as fuck if you really want to try to get through
a bunch of seasons. Otherwise,
shit. You get introduced to fans very quick. I mean,
yeah, and
it's
that's even like because there's so few players within this kind of umbrella of it who have gone to the big name schools, who have kind of been around, like say, like we're that other starter on the national winning Virginia Tech team, maybe, right? Or not Virginia Tech, but Virginia that won the national championship. Okay. That doesn't give you, the gateway to, that top league or everything, right? So there are a few of those people. So the majority we're talking about are the ones that haven't had a big name school possibly, and maybe didn't have a big role. So this is why I really want to emphasize to those players, because those are the players we're talking about. If we're going to be real, Aaron, those are the players, because why? The others are already in the NBA, WNBA, or top EuroLeague teams who have played on the national team, like you kind of have a few asterisks where maybe, yeah, you could say, no, I don't want that top Series A team in Italy. I want this one. And so you have a bit more rope. All of you males and females, and I think you could agree with this, right, Ermi? They could kind of do that. They could maybe pick leagues per se, like to a certain extent, right? Would I be fair to say? Okay.
Yeah, no, it's very fair to say.
So,
Yeah.
so the majority of people that we are then addressing to with this, you do not choose the league chooses you statement, you have to understand that doing your time in one part is what is going to afford you the bigger things in the next leagues, in everything else. So you cannot come in and think all high and mighty of yourself, because if that was the case, you would already have something. Like, let's just say it as it is. So when I've experienced like one player, like from a player development standpoint, I was in the gym with her, and she didn't have anything yet. And I'm thinking, okay, like in the lower type of league, she could still be good. Like she was still good, but like not the places that she was naming that she wanted to play. And I'm thinking in my head, oh, that's probably 1 or 2 years of developing in, other countries, getting your like foot in the door, developing your game through that aspect. And then you could get there, like, because your now most certainly is not your forever. But in understanding that, I then said, oh, like, did you have this, this, and this? Oh, yeah, I had here. I turned it down. I had this. I turned it down. I turned it. And in my head, from a player development standpoint, I'm like, why? From the former player within my time, I also was thinking, why? Like, most of the time too, I think it's a lot more on the female side because it's a bit more scarce. It's a money thing because there's less money. So if they could milk out more, but I think like, yes, it still plays in part with the male side of the game, but I think in the male side of the game with this, and it's what you kind of just referenced to, I think it's just a bit more like name and ego of, no, I only want NBL 1 type thing. Not to say it doesn't happen with females, but I think females are definitely driven by this league thing a bit more on the money standpoint than it is the other side of thing. But regardless, yeah, just remind yourself that you're never going to choose the league or the country yet, possibly never. But the more time that you have with something, hey, maybe you get a bit more leash here or there. So, you pick another question.
All right.
This one definitely, I think, is gonna
Be interesting.
So overseas basketball is just more than Europe. Yeah.
Overseas basketball is more than Europe.
Yeah. I mean,
these are all like, let's just also say, like, I got to give credit, audience, to Airman with all of these statements. Like, when you just like hear these statements, there is so much power behind these simple few words that are allowing us to like just blow this open. But like when you read or hear something like that, yeah, it should take you a minute to think, whoa, I need to zoom out here. So it's the feeling I got just right then and there. Especially as an import. I will admit, anytime I hear overseas, I used to just only think Europe. So I'm interested to hear kind of on your standpoint, and then me dabble into this.
This surely stems for one thing. I mean, the work I do now, it's more surrounding this because
this past stigma, because
when I used to be a player,
anybody that I spoke to internationally, they would always have eyeballs
on Europe. Yeah, but I mean, this is not happening in Italy. This is not happening in Greece. This is not happening in Switzerland. This, that. I mean, they would be so stuck up on just Europe that they would disregard everywhere else. I mean, right now outside the U.S., It's unbelievable. I mean, here's a fact. Go check the new FIBA migration report. China is the top destination for imports outside. I mean, don't count the whole European nations that are playing
Euro. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, exclude that factor,
Yeah.
then you've got China that actually makes the most money.
Really, over Australia.
Yeah. I mean, it's
Surely because the import factor there is way more highly sought after.
Thought out. Yeah.
And I mean,
what was her name?
she's also an Australian national team player. Alana
Smith plays for the Minnesota Lynx. Yeah.
Yeah, she played for the Lynx past season.
Season before this,
She was in Turkey.
Yeah.
An amazing season, and it was really, really interesting to me to see her even be sent over through her agency over to China.
It's unbelievable
To me. I mean, she's a very top level player. Love to see her play for sure. And I mean, now she's in Asia, ripping it apart in China. And I mean, naturally she's closer to home, so obviously I think it's is a little bit of a travel circumstance for her, most probably. I mean, when she ever has a break, she most probably finds it easier to get back over to Australia, most probably.
But I mean, to just bring it back to
To this whole
thought process, I mean, yeah, overseas basketball is definitely just more than one
part of a continent, and I mean, if you are seeking to just get your first contract, or if it's the fact that you're a vet, you're looking for your next job, don't exclude anywhere. And I mean anywhere. I mean, we even think that, I mean, all right, if you get an opportunity in Iceland is grown.
Oh God,
in terms of
Iceland! I would hope people are not sleeping on Iceland that much, Jeremy, because from the female standpoint, Iceland in the professional leagues, insane.
Quality of play, insane.
I mean, on the women's side, even the start of this season, even though I wasn't expecting it, most probably she did her pre-reading about it. We had a Dutch player. She's a top-level scorer, Esther Foka. She signed a deal to play in Iceland. I'm so happy for her. To be honest with you, I mean, she deserves all the attention that she gets there, and I hope that she ends up having her even next bigger contract, bigger than Iceland, because I mean, it is insane of how that country has grown in terms of basketball recognition. They were considered an underdog. They have beaten God knows how many European national teams, and they're still overlooked. And I mean, at the national team level, the only reason why they're doing so well is because of the number of imports that are coming into that country are crazy, crazy good.
And again, I'll take this through a whole timeline back
in the 90s till about the beginning of the 2000s. Iceland was overlooked a lot, even in Europe. And now you have the same circumstance happening in former Soviet countries, for instance. I mean, there's Azerbaijan, for instance, right now. Men's basketball exploding over there. Ton of oil money that is popping up. In terms of men's basketball, you want to go play basketball somewhere internationally, go to Azerbaijan. If you get that opportunity, blow it up, go over there straight away.
Or this is coming off the back end of just, you know, the beauty of seeing how much international basketball through the world has really started to expand and become a lot more of from the Olympics. South Sudan for the males, right?
Yeah.
And so it goes, what do those countries have in common, from like Iceland to South Sudan to Azerbaijan? They're all small compared to, yes, the Spain, Italy. However, from like my line of work now is player development and how skill and culture and the way with which the country develops a style is all the evidence and proof you need that will, if you could do that and approach training in the game and learn to play it in that sort of style and different aspect, you are going to beat the bigger countries regardless, because it's the quality and how you're playing versus what you're playing. And that even goes like through a bit more authentic acquisition of skill and more conceptual way of playing and training, that I see it. That's how I view why those countries are able to now start to surpass the bigger giants in that sort of aspect. So I definitely agree with you. Even from the standpoint, the South Americas, like one of my best friends, so she did like her bigger ones within Europe, but right after, because most of the time South America's season also offsets on Europe. So when she finished in May, then so she had two instances. One, this was the first one, where she finished up in Europe in one of her she was with Pakinos at that time,
Yep.
in Greece. And then her agent called and said, there's a team in Mexico. They need a player for the playoffs and to make the playoff push. So then she heads on down to Mexico, goes and wins the cup. Now here's the import. It's 6'5" lefty national team, like female. So yeah, like you're coming in, wins the cup, goes but plays in Mexico for month or 2 months or so. And then the other one, when then she played for the rival team in Greece. So what's the purple team's name in Greece? It's the rival to.
Yeah,
Okay. So anyways, that team. Okay. So now she was on that
team though,
team.
but I mean,
They finished the season. Who calls? Lebanon. So then she goes to Lebanon and goes, and I'm gonna guess up my friend here. But then she goes to Lebanon and she helps them win the cup, and goes there. So in those smaller countries, once again, now I know Lebanon's a part of like the Europe standpoint. But when it comes to like South America, that's something where a lot of people should look into, as well as like I have another friend who has only ever played in South America and got his first stint, and he did want to do Europe, but then he loved South American basketball a lot more. And you have like the Chiles that are doing really good on the international circuit. And then of course you have Argentina, where you had like a Manu and you had a Luis Scola, like all those, or no, wait, Luis Scola. Oh yeah, I was right. But you have South America as powerhouses as well. I will say, and I think you could agree, maybe why people think of overseas basketball and as just Europe, now they have their places as well. From a safety standpoint, when you think of South America, you think maybe more like gangs, a bit more dangerous.
I think
especially if we're
it's-
gonna talk more female aspect, like that's gonna be like a little different type of thing. I would actually say would be a difference. So I see a lot less females and a lot less hesitant because of money already down in the female side, if we're just going to talk about male and female. And then we're just now going to talk about a bit more about
though.
like, so I think maybe that's why specifically now I'm specifically just like pertaining to females in this instance, why they would be hesitant to like going to maybe the Dominican, going there, because like they don't see that more so as a place, or even in Africa to get paid, all that sort of stuff, because you really don't hear of those leagues. So I think maybe that's why people just think if they're not playing the WNBA and they're playing to get paid to get money, they associate that with Europe. And we're talking not just within the ones playing the Euro League on the female standpoint. I'm going to asterisk all this on the female standpoint. I think that's where I could see because I may truthfully, like from the player standpoint, like when I was going through it and when I read that statement, overseas basketball is more than Europe, I am 100% guilty of just associating that. Now I do not, but when I did, that's what I was thinking of. I was thinking, okay, money's there, then it's Australia, and then everywhere else, they're not considered basketball in the world. South America, football for me. China was just never, like, I knew it was big, but like personally for me, no real desire within the Asian game, all that sort of stuff. So that was hearsay. So I think that's why I gravitated towards that, but I'm very curious about your thoughts. I think it could be just like a safety thing. I don't know about the South Americas, but I do love how this statement is. It is more than just Europe, like you said, more than just those core Euro League teams, because you still have like Lithuania. I remember talking to a coach in Lithuania, but I was like pretty scared because I was like, oh, this is really Eastern European. This could be like very like Russia, like World War II type like thing, cold, like communism, like that, all the stereotypes definitely did it, I'll admit. But yeah, like that's kind of where I was thought wise. But so I could see, I'm very curious to know from your standpoint, just like because you are a bit more within that.
This is entirely a historical circumstance. Think of it this way. The first ever players to actually come into the NBA were from Europe.
Yeah, and from Eastern European to boot, right?
Precisely. So because of that factor, in North America, the stigma that Europe has is, so if I go to Europe, I'm going back there from where they're from.
Okay.
That perception pretty much stuck till about the 90s. After about the beginning of the 90s, that started to change because when the floodgates pretty much opened up, I mean, you had players going to college, not just pro players going into the NBA. And I mean, it wasn't just Eastern Europe. So it wasn't just Serbia and then the whole lot of other places like Lithuania as well. That's when people started to understand, so it's not just there. So then it's the whole international scene did open up even further. All right. The added whole security circumstance comes in on the back end of that. But this is also a part of how the scouting journey in the US, I mean, how international scouts really did do a lot of their work. I mean, when they were sent out, you first of all would go to Europe back then. And whose book was it? There was one very, very good book I had read back in the day. Wayne Embry. Yeah, I think it was the book of Wayne Embry. He used to be a GM in the NBA way back in the day. We're talking about the 70s, 80s, and kind of like till about the cusp of the 90s. I mean, that's when he was a GM. He wrote in his book, just trying to remember the name. I actually most probably even, bear with me for a second. I'll just even pull it up if I. I even remember I had this digitalized at some point. It is such a The Game Inside. That's what it's called. So if you ever get an opportunity to read that book, it really tells you about how race, power, and politics were dealt with back in the day in the NBA.
Oh wow!
And yeah, the foreword was done by Spike Lee. Really, really interesting book. And yeah, I mean, in that book, there's kind of like very short bits and pieces of how people were perceiving international basketball to be. And it was very interesting because when I was looking at turning into being an NBA scout and doing a lot of work
Mhm.
directly for the league, a lot of the, let's say, preconceived notions that I had to tear down were already there. And people were asking me, like, all right, so from what part of Russia are you from? You're blonde, you've got blue eyes, so I'm assuming that you're Russian.
No, I'm not.
Why would you even say that? I mean, it's
Right.
like crazy small kind of details that they try to pick up on
Mhm.
and that are not even in any way true.
Right.
And because of this entire historical circumstance, this is what it is. I mean, overseas basketball is more than Europe.
Mhm.
That's where it stems from. It's actually a reverse circumstance of what people were thinking in the US
Mhm.
of where it really did end up coming from in a way.
Mhm. Yeah, because I really think it goes, um, you know, NBA, WNBA, like in my head, it was that. And then next was Europe within the certain powerhouse countries. Like from the female standpoint, like your Spain's, your Italy's, your France's, Germany,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Turkey, Russia, always put in a separate category. Why? Because personally, for me, never played on the national team. No WNBA, Division One, like Russia, Turkey was in a
Mm-hmm.
separate category that I was realistic it would not be.
Mm-hmm.
So like that's kind of in there. But then I knew quickly, right fast after that, and just understanding a bit more, it was then Australia. And then I think it's the other country or like the other continents really um that are slowly now coming on scene, just how like Europe was, everything was developing, where now these are options. There's good play here. It gets you maybe something like a great amount of money, because let's be real, in those countries, like you said, in Panama, like the amount you get paid is like incredible. The amount you're getting paid in China, incredible compared to somewhere in Europe, right? And even if we go back to it, people in Europe, especially on the female side, and especially like when you're in Russia and Turkey, it is no secret, although it's getting better, you get paid more than the WNBA. Now,
So very much so.
NBA, yeah, in some of them, with NBA players, now it'll depend. Like, yeah, if you're sitting on the bench and you're getting six figures versus if you're playing and you could get like maybe 1 million when you're playing in China. Yeah, okay. So, but the fact of the matter is that those countries like South America, all that, they pay really well. They may be underdeveloped, but if you need the pay and you just need the reps and more time building your resume, then yeah, maybe then you go to Europe where you do want to play. But I really do love how you put this statement of overseas basketball is more than Europe, because I firmly believe it is still just being looked like that.
Yep.
And I like how you did say, mainly because like I'll admit to that too, wherever that European player came from, like that's Europe. And I think it also just goes into a sense, and one of my friends put it really well done, more so like for the Americans, not to say Canadians don't do this, but Americans, because they have like that huge lucrative NBA, the market, the NCAA, they live in their own bubble and they really don't kind of like expose themselves to the other parts of the world as much as maybe Canadians or other people do, because once again, they don't have kind of, the powerhouse, the mecca of what they're dealing with as they do in the States. So to me, it kind of makes sense where like, yeah, maybe those individuals coming from the States are less aware of the opportunities that they can have in different countries and that they actually do exist. And it's not just black and white states or your top Spain, Italy, France. In Europe, that's it. That's all maybe now, or like now Serbia. Why? Because Jokic does such a great job, all that sort of stuff. So just going back to it, yeah, it's so much more than Europe. And I love actually kind of seeing how China has really now started to get pushed on the female side. Why? Because there were more Chinese and Japanese females coming into the WNBA system. And now why are Americans aware of it? Because somebody came into their like little snow globe. That's how I kind of see it. And really, if we just take everything as well, you don't see what you just don't see, right? So yeah, I love that statement. And yeah, well done. I will say one more question. Let's do one more. And I kind of I'm going to pick it, but I also kind of want you to start it because I'm not quite sure what you mean by it, but I think I may now know. 16 is the magic number.
Damn, that's what I was gonna pick.
All right.
16 is the magic number. Now, can I just throw my guess out now and say, are you
Go
referring
for it. Go for it.
16 as referencing age?
Nope.
Oh, okay. Now
No,
you
no,
completely
no,
got
it was
me
not.
off. Now I have no idea because, like, from my standpoint, player development aspect, 16 is a critical number that I want more athletes and parents to be aware of. But from your aspect now I'm kind of lost. So 16 is the magic number.
And
I found this out very, very fast.
here's how the
Story goes. So,
I signed my first pro
contract, and lo and behold, 2 weeks into my first pro contract, I'm playing my second professional game. All of a sudden, we have three American imports, and then we have one European player, and then we've got about 9
other
domestic players, and
I play
about
7-8 minutes
during that game, I score like
9 points.
and one thing leads to another, and 2 of the imports there on the bench, they're yelling at me, keep scoring, keep scoring, keep scoring. I'm like, guys, there's only about 30 seconds left on the clock till the game ends. What do you guys end up expecting me to have? And like the game is done, I end up having about 12 points. And after the game is done, we're about to head into the locker room. They're cussing at me. Why'd you get to 16? Why'd you get to 16? I'm like, what's up? Why? I mean, like I scored 12 points, and I mean, like I had 8-9 minutes, which was my max anyway for the game that I was allowed by my coach anyway. So I mean, he actually kept me in the game longer than I was expecting. So
After the game is done,
when we're out to dinner, they give me the explanation. So in a game, if you're able to get to about 16 points,
then you're seen by international
prospects a lot better. And time rolls down.
And during that entire
First season, I'm like constantly clicking in my head, get 16, get 16, get 16.
That's
break it down.
that's as in scoring average.
Yeah, it's just scoring average, and it starts to get to me so hard. But during that entire first season, I have an average of 16.
Okay.
The fun thing was, after that second game, I started dissecting it down into quarters.
Yeah.
So like yeah, precisely. So I mean, and back then, games were still in 2 halves.
Okay. So 8.
Yeah. So I mean, I was going for 8 and 8, but I mean, the way that I was going for 8 and 8 was really funny. Like I was trying to get 2 3-pointers and then get just another 2 free throws. That was it. That's all that I was trying to focus on. Because I mean, if I go get
3 jumpers mid-range,
I'd still have to work for those other 2
foul shots to actually
try to get them. And I mean, I rarely got fouled.
Yeah.
because I mean,
They either weren't able to touch me because I was really too quick, or because I was behind the 3-point line, they really didn't want to touch me at all.
Right.
So I mean, because I broke it down and dissected it down, that key of staying at 16 just stuck. And I mean, throughout the 4 years I played, first season I had 16-point average. Second season I had 16-point average, but then it naturally dropped. I mean, I couldn't play as much, and I mean, injuries really started to nag me. So I dropped to about 12 the third year, and then I had about nine or 10 last year before I had to stop. But still, I mean, it was like crazy to me to think. I mean, and it was just from one sheer circumstance in the game, and my imports pretty much kind of like shouting out to me, "Yeah, just get this."
Wow. You know what?
I
I think reporters and like, you know, everyone analyzing, they always say, "Oh, I wonder if that player knew they were close to history, close to a triple double or all that sort of stuff." And man, we're always counting, and especially like in the NBA and like NCAA and even the females in the college game, they've said it. Because like when you're playing in those bigger arenas, like you see the stats, like the stats are actually up there. So like I always kind of like questioned, because like I've never played where like the scoreboard does have like your field goal percent, like so I always wondered. But like when it was one point Caitlin Clark was saying that, or you kept seeing her kind of look up, like they're obviously like, yeah, checking the stats as if like you had the paper right in front of you, right? LeBron's come out and said it before. So like players are aware of it. And like, you know, when you're in that unconscious state, you kind of just like roughly know. And I will say, because it was a goal of mine, along with like, my player development coach, like when I was playing in Germany, of the amount of threes I need to take, but also make in a game. And the take was over 10 attempts. And I'm like, Jesus, like sheer volume. And that's not just being like a pure shooting, like that's somebody running the point and hunting down 10 threes. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And so I just remembered as the season went on, because in one of the German seasons, like I led the league in 3 points taken and made and highest percentage. And yeah, and so I knew in every game, I was like, I need to keep my average up. So I knew the number that I had to hit and always make, so that like my number didn't go down. And so like from that aspect, but 16, I've never really heard of like 16, which, you know what, it makes sense, because 16 is a respectable away from 20, because when people are like averaging 20, it's just like, that's like pretty hard to average like 20 consistently against consistent player, all that sort of stuff, like reasonable, like 20, 25, right? Because 30 is, now we're getting into like you're absurd kind of thing. So 16, reasonable away from 20. But it's also, hey, look at me. I'm not just getting 10 double digits. I'm getting like over. So like I could see how 16 looks very attractive for people and for internationals. I love the story and the origin behind it. So now every time when I look at box scores and everything, I'm just going to look for the number 16 because of this. But I will say, from the player development standpoint, little twist on it, 16, I would be referencing the age, the actual chronological age of that athlete, mainly because anything before the age of 16, parents, athletes, coaches, trainers, everybody, you don't need to specialize. Please do not specialize. It is not about early specialization. It is about early diversification. And the more that you could have, the more of an athlete you could be, the more you're going to develop that dexterity and those abilities, those qualities, those athletic abilities that you need to acquire the higher levels of skill, to actually perform at the highest levels. And those skills, those qualities, they're relevant. They may not be specific, but they are relevant. body awareness, body control, stability, whether it's turning ability in the air, everything and all of that sort of stuff, going and doing a warm-up of parkouring or going and playing soccer or a different sports. The more that you could expose your body to the different learning environments, you are doing athletes and those potential high-level basketball players, the most skillful in the world, the best shot at being just that. And that's if you don't put them in a box, or even if you are just doing basketball, don't put them in one role. Hey, you're only a 1, you're a 2 guard. First of all, it's positionless basketball. Second of all, if you only associate the 1 guard with these skills and qualities and only associate this and these skills and qualities, you no longer are able to give yourself the chance to be the most skillful player, because the most skillful player is the most adaptable player on the court. So that doesn't mean you could just play the 1 or the 2. It's you're playing everything and you have those certain qualities of each and every one. Now, it doesn't mean like I got to have a complete post package, but like, let's take Jalen Brunson. Jalen Brunson is a 6'2". I think he's 6'2". He's a 6'2" guard, but he has a post package that derived from Kobe, derived from Michael, okay, that you have that. You have Joel Embiid, who has a backup, and even Jokic, a backup game, who now they're stepping out to the 3-point line. So you can't just, confine and specialize to a specific position, but now specifically before 16, do not put them, and the worst for girl, I could go on a tangent for it, but for girls, if you are tall and you just go underneath the basket, it's more so for girls that are more susceptible to this. For guys, if there's a tall guy, they still do it, but like guys naturally just like move away because they got a bit more ego and they want to play a bit more everywhere. They want to play a bit more free. But for females, if you are tall, because it's very rare, you are only ever told to go run down to the block and you stay there. You are doing them a disservice. I wish I was 6 foot minimum, because then that would be my minimum for national team and Team Canada. But 6'2" and length as a guard, my goodness gracious me. Like, that is so beautiful. And so 16, I'm referencing from a skill standpoint, from a player development practitioner, do not specialize before that age, because the more that you could be an athlete and mover, the more you're going to acquire those skills and those abilities at a much more efficient and faster rate that will get you to playing in leagues against competition, regardless if you were a quote unquote late bloomer. Okay. You could play all those sports and not play basketball until, say, 16, very rare case, 16, 17, and still get a scholarship, still go play professionally. It was just the other last night. I actually didn't know this, but Jewel Lloyd was on the path of being a tennis player. And she said to her dad, I don't want to do tennis. I want to be a team sport person. So, and she was even still explaining to this day how she's still learning some like very fine-tuned details and like basics that somebody like, if they stuck with basketball right from the get-go, would know. So that's a prime example of somebody who is one of the top scorers in the WNBA history, didn't specialize before the age of 16. So it just hammers home my point in referencing this number of 16 is do not specialize within a position, but do not specialize within a sport until afterwards. And then that's when the more serious like circuit and, higher level basketball and quality really just starts too. But you don't need to be the best at 13, 14. That shouldn't be the goal. It's the long game, but that's my reference to 16 versus your reference to 16. But yeah, I love that one. That's a good one.
Nice.
All right, partner. Let's get one more done and then call
One
it a day for
more.
now. Yeah, let's just do one more and then call it a day.
Okay.
and I'll close off with this one because I think it hits home
on both ends pretty well.
Okay.
Film is the great equalizer. Now, reason I'm picking this to close off. So, I mean, regardless of time, regardless of us having played and players that are going to keep on playing this game, you do not
Watch yourself.
or you don't watch your opponent play, you don't prepare, there's nothing going to be stopping you, buddy. And I mean,
In that sense,
if you watch yourself go through mistakes, if you watch yourself
do the right things, then you're definitely going to equalize the playing field on what you're going to be doing next. In that sense, I put this
one
one
up there. So this is about
studying yourself.
as a player from a player development perspective. Even, I mean,
I don't know how much you do it.
to be honest, I mean, with the players that you do, but I mean, the ones that I locally consult with or that I have practice sessions with, even, I mean, the teams that I'm a part of, every practice is recorded, every game is recorded, every game is analyzed, every practice to the point or the extent of where I can at least bring out teaching sessions from or teaching insights from, I provide those key insights to the players, so much so that at least that it minimizes the kind of mistakes they might end up being prone to doing again and again. So
To me, in this sense, I mean, this is one of,
let's say, the keys of how you even develop as an overseas player. If you ever stop
to think that you're going to not grow
as a player, then you understand that really film
is not going to be that
important, and so it won't be as great as an equalizer. So bear this in mind, people. For those that are
tuning in that
have tuned into this point and that do hear me out about this one is a serious home hitter to me, and it has pushed me from being a former pro player to being a scout to being a consultant to having worked with numerous number of teams to the point where I now know how critical it really can hit home.
Mhm.
So there you have it, partner.
This one is a very loaded one, and I want to hit it in a concise and very clear way from two different angles with it. Number one is that film does not lie. From a player standpoint, I remember getting taught that, being introduced to it in university was the first time where it reveals the things, because in the moment you could say, no, I didn't do that. Oh, the player didn't go that way. And then when you watch it back, you're like, ooh, I was in the wrong. Okay. So film does not lie. And I remember film sessions like with coach, one possession. I remember this was in my third year, one possession took the whole hour 15, just ripped it apart. And I was like, hey, this is what film reveals. So from a player standpoint, film does not lie in that aspect. From the other point of the player standpoint, but also as a player development practitioner, and even as coaches and within organizations who have specific film study scout team people, images are better than words. And it's what allows a lot of athletes. Now, you have different types of learners, obviously auditory, kinesthetic, visual, but the way with which the mind generates memories, the way that it consolidates things and allowing for skill and learning to remain long term and to be stored, it associates it with an image. And so when you learn by watching, which is one of the biggest things to then segue to, females don't watch a lot. And it doesn't mean you have to immerse yourself in basketball and watch it 24/7, What I'm saying is, and you even made the mention of it, is watch yourself. Yeah, guys have no problem doing that, and guys will admit it because they just want to see themselves like cook somebody, or like, it's the ego thing. Females still do that same. However, there's very few females that actually do that. But males are naturally a bit more culturally, where they grow up watching highlights. They grow up watching Allen Iverson, watching Michael Jordan, watching whoever their player they love, and they go out immediately and onto the playground against the boys, hooping, and they're using their imagination. They're doing that. Very few females do that. Very few females watch females play. You don't have to. But then very few females are just watching in general and then doing just that. Then immediately going out into the backyard, onto the playground, hooping, and turning away, and as if they just saw and watched Michael Jordan or Allen Iverson or Becky Hammon do a hang finish. That's something that I did. That's something that, I see within certain females when I walk into a gym, why they're moving, why they're already playing very differently. And it's because I asked them, hey, did you grow up with the males? Hey, do you have an older brother? And by associating that, I know that they have just then been around watching basketball a lot more. And so watching is allowing you to associate those images, is allowing you to learn, it's allowing you to pick up and acquire and try things so much faster, and you develop a bit more faster. Now, once again, you don't have to watch basketball. Some basketball players have even come out, even at the highest level in the NBA, saying they don't like watching basketball if it's not their film, or if it's of a scout. They just don't want to tune in. But what I'm saying is, like for you have to watch film in order to learn. And the more you could watch, the more that you're giving yourself an opportunity to see what others are doing, and that could creatively spark you, but also you're learning so that from the next time you're not going to make that other same mistake. So film, yes, is a great equalizer, but I will also say it is one of the biggest differentiators, because those, say, players who aren't starting, who aren't getting playing time, if you're always picking up on things within film sessions, or watching things and then now immediately going and trying on your own, training creatively, staying ready so that when your opportunity does come, you now have something different than that player who did not watch film, who did not learn from the mistake, and now their opportunity is gone, and now you have the opportunity. Why? Simply because you studied the film and you watched, and then you automatically started to mess around with it, play with it, and start to acquire skill that way. And all simply because you just watched film. So that could be your biggest ticket to getting playing time. It could be your biggest ticket to now having coach trust you in those big moments, because you watched scout, because you understand the offense, or you have seen something that maybe your player ahead of you has not done. It could be your greatest advantage with somebody who is not taking film seriously. So what I will say on the last aspect of film is, from a player development standpoint, I, in sessions, am recording, and in between reps, I'll come over before maybe the player needs to go in, after they've maybe messed up. They're still not figuring out. I say, come over here. And then I show them on the phone, and then they watch and they're like, oh, I don't say anything else. And then they go. So utilizing that tool as well. Or if you are training by yourself, athletes, film yourself and then study and watch just how power lifters and weightlifters in between reps are filming themselves for technique. You could be doing the exact same with your movements. And that's why it's so critical for me as a player development practitioner to utilize film, and then to show and work alongside with athletes, and then to guide them and kind of, allow them, to give them permission, film all your workouts, especially when you're trained by yourself, because now I have something to look at where I could maybe, think we could solve this problem together. But at the same time, it's allowing you to solve the problem first and think, because everyone kind of has to go through this. It just can't be me. Where Rocky's running in Rocky 2, or even in Rocky 1, because he does the same scene, the training montage where he's running on the port, and then he's running faster and faster than the actual like ship that's going by. Yeah. Everyone thinks that when they're running on the treadmill, they're looking awesome and crisp like Rocky. Okay, they have that image in their head, but then you look at the mirror.
That's a good one, yes.
You are not running like Rocky when you look over in the mirror. So my point being
Good one.
is images. Okay, so you have to have that image in your head. And yes, film is the greatest equalizer, but it could also be your biggest advantage. That's a great one.
All right. Well, everybody, I think we're going to call it a day for now. We've been at it for about 2 hours.